Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, who is in Minneapolis. The president of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Georgetown law professor and former federal prosecutor Paul Butler. Gentlemen, welcome. So, Gabe, what is the prosecution building to with this questioning of the chief of police?
Hey there, Katie. Well, as you mentioned, the prosecution is building up steam as it questions Madera Arradondo, the first black police chief of the Minneapolis Police Department. And Katie, as you know, this chief has been very outspoken in his criticism of Derek Chauvin. In an interview last summer, he told me he didn't even want to be in the same room with him, wouldn't even speak his name. Well, we expect the prosecution to go directly at that. Did Derek Chauvin violate his training? Did he go further than he needed to? Did he use excessive force? Now, Katie, as you also alluded to, this morning the defense tried to limit some of the police testimony. So the question will be, how much will the defense object to some of this questioning? We expect some clash between the police chief and the defense attorney potentially as his testimony unfolds this afternoon, Katie.
You know, Paul, I want to get your take on that because the defense is trying to argue that with all of these police officers, they're giving their opinions. Is the chief of police here giving his opinion, or is he an expert witness?
Both. So this is a big deal. First of all, in most prosecutions of officers, police chiefs typically don't get involved in the trial, or they seem to support the cop. So this testimony could really impact the jury. I think the strategy is to reach those jurors who may be worried that voting to convict Floyd means that they don't support the police. So the chief's testimony sends the message that the police aren't on trial. This is about Derek Chauvin and his excessive use of force, which both violated the regulations of the MPD and was a substantial contributing factor in Mr. Floyd's death.
Well, Paul, let me ask you this, because Gabe mentioned it a moment ago, and during the interview that he did with the chief of police last summer, he said he didn't even want to be in the same room as Derek Chauvin. Is the defense going to bring that up? Are they going to try to argue that the chief of police has animus towards the defendant?
I don't think so. He's too strong a witness, the chief is, for that to be credible. So far, the testimony is focused on training and procedure, including de-escalation, how officers are supposed to defuse dangerous situations so they don't have to use force. And we know the chief's view is that Derek Chauvin flagrantly violated those procedures. The chief said before the trial, he thinks that Chauvin is guilty of murder. Now, he's not going to be allowed to use that word in court, because that's what the jury has to determine. But we know he has very emphatic feelings about not only Chauvin not being a good officer, the chief thinks that he's a murderer.
Reverend Al Sharpton, we've been discussing this all day, that it's so unusual for a chief of police to testify against an officer. We just don't see it. I know you've had a lot of experience with cases just like this. What does it say to you in the broader scheme of things that this police chief is choosing to get involved and choosing to take a side against one of his officers?
I think it is very significant. I don't think you could stress the significance too much. In the years that I've been involved in police reform and police cases and as heading National Action Network, I can't remember a police chief getting on the stand against an indicted police officer. And we've had other policemen that have testified last week. And to have policemen after policemen and now the chief testify, it takes away the imprimatur that they try to put on cases like this and those of us that raise questions of police reform, that we're anti-police. How are you anti-police if the police are saying what he did was wrong? And you must remember, Katie, in this particular case, based on the 3 counts he's been indicted for, they don't have to prove intent. They only have to prove he intended to harm, or by his actions it led to the death of George Floyd, which is why the defense is trying to move to causation with drugs, because they don't have to prove that he intended to kill him. All they have to prove is that he intended on one charge to harm him, on another that what he did resulted in the death. And that's enough for this jury to convict him if that's their determination.
On the subject of drugs, there was a moment there this morning when the doctor was being questioned and the defense came out, Paul, and said the high levels of oxygen in his blood, the reason for his death, couldn't that be attributed to fentanyl? And the doctor asked for a clarification, but wasn't allowed to give it until the redirect of the prosecution came around. When he clarified, he basically shot down the defense's argument there. How significant will that be?
You know, Katie, after the police witnesses, this trial will be a battle of expert witnesses on the cause of Floyd's death. And so the prosecution is going to present doctors and others who will testify that the drugs found in Floyd's system were not enough to kill him, in part because he developed a high tolerance level. And the prosecution's experts will also testify that Floyd's conduct in the minutes before his death is not consistent. That conduct wasn't consistent with someone who is about to die of an overdose. And we've seen the defense response. They're going to focus on Floyd's pre-existing medical condition and the quantity of drugs that Floyd consumed. Again, we'll have to see if that is successful. All they have to do is create reasonable doubt, poke holes in the prosecution's case to enroll that one juror who has reasonable doubt, and that gives them a hung jury and a mistrial. That's why the prosecution is presenting all these cops and all this medical expert, because they have to reach all 12 jurors for their unanimous verdict, which they obviously hope is a conviction.
Which is a high bar. Reverend Al Sharpton, quickly, the family, how are they doing today? First off, with the doctor's testimony, and secondly, seeing the chief of police testify against Derek Chauvin.
I spoke with them last night. They are back in Minneapolis. I'll be joining them tomorrow. We pray together just about every day, and I've been out there last week. They are prayerful, hopeful, but it's painful. As much as it looks like the case is going well, they have to relive watching their brother, their uncle, their cousin die, him narrating his death. So it's very painful, but this is a strong and solid and prayerful family, and I intend to be with them as I promised when I came to do the eulogy for George Floyd.
I imagine it's hard to hear that nobody gave your family member, your loved one, CPR while that person was gasping for breath. Gabe Gutierrez, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Paul Butler. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.